Hulk Hogan has got the masked man. Hulk Hogan's gone down. Will we find out who is under the mask? And oh my God, it's Brother Brudi. He's butchered a friendship. He's butchered a friendship. And then later, Hulk Hogan and the Butcher, Brother Brudi, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, not his wife Betty the Barbeck Queefcake, the man with no name, the Zodiac, and then later the Disciple, and then later the man that would end up basically thinking that he was God's gift to wrestling would butcher the Starrcade main event scene. Boy, did they ever. But before that, this event happened. An event that certainly had some monumental moments. Monumentally stupid and monumental for crowd reaction. And also for building storylines because this is before Nitro kicked things into gear. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WCW Halloween Havoc 1994, The Redux. Yeah, I did this about 5 years ago and decided I want to add more snark and more fun. First, let's talk about the fact this is in the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. 20,000 seating capacity, around 14,000 fans, and 210,000 people bought on pay-per-view. Now, that sounds pretty good. Let's look at the previous Halloween Havoc events, and then at 1995. So, in 1989, they had the first annual Halloween Havoc. That was in Philly, 7,300 fans, and 175,000 pay-per-view buys. Not too bad. 1990, where things really started to fall into a pit, despite the fact that they had numerous great talents. Jim Herd kept running people off. And then Ole basically ran off being Mark Callis, and he went right across the way to Vince McMahon and got the greatest gift of, arguably rather, the greatest gimmick of all time, with The Undertaker. So, Chicago. They were in Chicago in 1990. 8,000 fans. I believe that was at the UIC Pavilion. 160,000 pay-per-view buys. Okay, not awful, but then 1991, oh boy, Chamber of Horrors, and also Lex Luger and Ron Simmons having a match where Ron really had to carry things. Chattanooga, Tennessee, no, not the UIC Pavilion, I don't remember actually what they called the building. UTC Arena, I think is what it was. 8,900 fans, not too bad, don't know how many were actually paid. 120,000 pay-per-view buys, oh boy. And then they were back in Philly in 1992. 7,000 fans, 165,000 pay-per-view buys, despite the fact that Bill Watts is basically running the quality of work into the goddamn ground. I love 1992 for WCW as far as tag team action and a few things, but Bill Watts, he couldn't be corporate. And he couldn't run things without being what he was. There is a reason why Paul Heyman ended up suing WCW. It wasn't because of Kip Fry. It wasn't because of Bill Shaw. It wasn't because of a bunch of other people. It was because of Bill Watts. You can't tell me otherwise. 1993, they were in New Orleans. I believe at the UNO Lakefront Arena, if I recall correctly, they had 6,000 fans. The UNO Lakefront Arena holds considerably more than that. 100,000 pay-per-view buys to witness Cactus Jack make his triumphant return to pay-per-view glory against Vader, and I believe a Texas death match. Then we go a year later after this one, 1995, Detroit, Michigan, Joe Louis Arena. Yeah, we had the infamous Sting, being turned on by Ric Flair. Oh, Sting, you idiot. And also the Monster Truck Rally. And then Hogan sending the Giant to his death, and then the Giant coming back. Not wet, not anything. And then he won the title by DQ. And then the Yeti helped dry hump Hogan. That was something that actually happened. I was 14 years old when I watched that on pay-per-view and was like, well, this is stupid. Anyway, they had 13,000 fans and 120,000 bought on pay-per-view. So apparently 90,000 said, we don't want to watch it after this. So let's take a look at the previous, or the 1994 run of pay-per-views, and then we'll get into the pay-per-view. Because I find this stuff more fascinating, just seeing what led up to, like a growth or a drop in business. So, Super Brawl 4 is before Hogan came in, by the way. Albany, Georgia, 7,600 fans, 110,000 pay-per-view buys. I believe that was Flair and Vader in the Thunder Cage match. And I think there was a 6-man tag in the Thunder Cage match. I think Dustin and Austin were involved in it. Spring Stampede 1994, Chicago, Illinois. 12,200 fans, 115,000 pay-per-view buys. They just can't get past that certain hump. That hump. That lovely pay-per-view hump. Check it out. That's right. I can sound as even whiter than you possibly thought. That had Steamboat and Flair in arguably a forgotten classic. And I wish it had led somewhere. Steamboat and Flair maybe having another match on pay-per-view. But then with Hogan coming in, Steamboat got shoved to the U.S. title scene. Nothing wrong with that. Him and Austin had a great series of matches. But they also had, I believe, Austin and Muta. God, it had Wyndham and somebody. I'm trying to remember. It had a pretty good card from what I remember. Sorry, it's a little bit hard for me to remember some of this stuff right at the top of my head. I can remember certain things. Slamboree 1994, they were back in Philly. 4,000 fans, so not great. 105,000 pay-per-view buys. But then Bash at the Beach 1994, Orlando, Florida. 14,000 fans. Hogan and Flair, that's what sold it. 225,000 pay-per-view buys. I believe that was either the biggest or close to the biggest pay-per-view buy rate that WCW had done up to that point. And then we go to Fall Brawl 1994 because they weren't running pay-per-views every single month. They would go to running pay-per-views every single month, I think, by 1996. Because 95, I think they still had a couple gaps. Nevertheless, they were in Roanoke, Virginia, 6,500 fans, 115,000 pay-per-view buys. So, and Hogan, if I recall correctly, I don't think Hogan was even on the card. Because the War Games match was Dusty, Dustin, and the Nasty Boys against Colonel Rob Parker's stud stable. And Rob Parker allegedly shitting himself, or possibly shitting himself. But nevertheless, we go to Starrcade 1994, where we had Brutus Beefcake in a Starrcade main event. Remember that. Remember that. Sting was in one Starrcade main event. He drew money. What the fuck did Brutus Beefcake ever do? I don't think that Brutus Beefcake is a bad person, but for somebody, and I'm glad that he survived that parasailing accident, because that was goddamn terrible. I mean, I can only imagine the pain that he went through. Still not as much pain as most people went through watching his matches. That's mean, but I'm sorry, the man just was never that good. Take a look at his work outside of working with Greg Valentine. Greg Valentine, premier worker, somebody. They could get the best out of anybody, whether he was across the ring from him or in the corner with him. And then he became Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and yes, he had the parasailing accident. Yes, he survived. Sid broke apart the barbershop. It was great. And then he lucked into numerous roles. A bunch of big paychecks from WCW. Now, yes, in the Dark Side of the Ring episode, he did get his money stolen by a bad accountant or manager or whatever the fuck the title is. And that's bullshit. And that shouldn't have happened. Nevertheless, yeah, Brutus Beefcake was in a Starrcade main event. They had Ric Flair retired at this event, and they had to go with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. That was in Nashville with 8,200 fans and 130,000 pay-per-view buys. So yeah, that brings us up to speed for this. So let's just get into the review and talk about the fact that we had a package on Hogan and Flair. Their history, obviously not their history that they could have, really built up in WWF. Vince didn't want to go with Hogan and Flair at Mania 8. So Turner pounced on it. Bischoff pounced on it, to his credit. Schiavone, Heenan in a neck brace, because I think Heenan actually legit did have his neck worked on at this point. I think he did have neck surgery. Or, I can't remember if it was a storyline, because some of this TV just still runs, kind of like runs together. And Okerlund, they welcome us. Heenan talks sports history, the Detroit Red Wings, Pistons, and Nancy Kerrigan's knee being hit. Yeah, they got her 50 feet away from us. Why? That Nancy Kerrigan, Tony Harding stuff, man. You would not, for people that were not around at that point, and some people in the comments may actually know, the amount of coverage that thing got. There were parts of wars that didn't get that much coverage. But anyway, T. Graham Brown sung the national anthem, sung in a sense that I guess he was trying to have vocals. And the main event match, Brad Armstrong was supposed to be in a tag match, but he had, I think, a family emergency. So it was Booker T against Brian Armstrong, the future Road Dogg. Oh boy. Gee, that must have been just a rip snorter. Booker T, premier worker, and on the rise at that point, and Brian Armstrong, who could not work a goddamn lick to save his life. And if only Bullet Bob had maybe just shown some remarkable restraint that night. Johnny B. Bad, the TV champion, took on the Honky Tonk Man. That's right, the Honky Tonk Man came into WCW and in last. in less because Honky still thought that he was a big star. Honky was always a shit worker, but he was charismatic enough to get by. And he didn't have to take bumps because he could get a lot of heat. I mean, I hated him when I was a kid. But by this point, did anybody want to pay to see the fucking Honky Tonk Man? So, Gary Michael Capetta was the ring announcer. I love Gary Michael Capetta, the world's most dangerous ring announcer. Honky and Bad went to a 10-minute time limit. That's really all I have to say right there. Because the match was what it was. Look, Mark Marrow is Johnny B. Bad. He was fine. He was never going to be more than like a mid-card guy. Because just he could work decently. He could do some cool spots. But he was trained basically specifically for this particular style. And he's gone and done motivational speaking stuff since. And he's done well with that. But after the time limit draw, Honky Tonk Man would end up losing on a bunch of house shows. He would leave Starrcade 94 because he wanted more money from Bischoff or something, whatever the deal is. I don't believe Bischoff on some stuff, but I believe him on this because who was Honky Tonk Man at that point to demand money from anybody when he was lucky to be involved in wrestling? So we cut to Sting and Mike Tenay. I don't know why Sting was dressed as a secret agent Sting. Secret agent Sting. He's giving you a number, and he's going to borden you to death. Do, show time. And yeah, I don't really have anything else for that. Muhammad Ali was in the front row. Yeah, that was fine. That was fine for what it was. I feel bad for Muhammad Ali as far as being one of the greatest boxers of all time. Some would argue the greatest. I'm not saying he was a perfect guy, but he tried to do a lot with his celebrity. They were going to give him a portion of the pay-per-view proceeds to help his future youth company, whatever the brand was. I forget the exact terminology. But, yeah, we go to Clash 94 recaps where a masked man targets Hogan's knee. Sherry was there at that point. And I love Sherry. I mean, I still wish that Sherry had been able to get her back surgery or at least get some kind of treatment for it and still be around. Because she could have imparted so much wisdom on so many of the women. So many of them. But we see some amateur footage. No, not that kind with Sherry. I certainly would have wanted to have seen that. Where Mr. T and Flair were talking. Oh no, Heenan gloats that it's in the bag. Yeah, Mr. T, kind of I think was in his own bag at this point. So pretty wonderful of Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff. Orndorff was about a year from fully retiring. Against Stars and Stripes, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, and the Patriot. It's for the WCW tag titles, and the crowd was up for this. Orndorff bumped his ass off. Roma was good in tag teams. Actually, Roma was great in tag teams. Roma was very athletic. I mean, I don't know if he still wrestles now because this pay-per-view is 30 years old. I thought in the Ric Flair and Four Horsemen documentary, they dumped on Roma way too much. I'm not saying Roma fit the group, but they had plenty of people in that group before that certainly didn't fucking fit. And Roma at least had a little bit of youth. You could have elevated him up. And again, Roma worked pretty good in tag teams. Had Roma not done what he had apparently done and gone into business for himself with Alex Wright, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I mean, it's pretty evident that Alex Wright was supposed to go over, and it just didn't come across well on pay-per-view, just from a fan's perspective. But Roma was somebody that him and Orndorff could have been a hell of a goddamn tag team, like into 95, like further into 95 until Orndorff retired. I don't know where Roma would have been after that. But they did some good stuff here. There was some good action, like, despite the fact that Bagwell was a lousy fucking worker. I mean, terrible. He tried to run the ropes at one point and got flummoxed, and that happens. I mean, they're humans. That happens, but good grief. There was a melee at the end and a distraction, Sky elbow, on Bagwell while he had a fisherman suplex on Orndorff. And Orndorff falls on Bagwell. 1, 2, 3. New tag team champions. Which are the old tag team champions because they had lost the titles the previous month. There you are. Mean Gene then was talking to Rick and Sherry. Again, Sherry. Good grief. Good God, y'all. Good God, y'all, Sherry. Then we do recaps of Kevin and David Sullivan, who was EVAD. Yes, Dave spelled backwards. And Dave Sullivan was terrible, just as a wrestler. I'm not saying as a person, but my God, he was rotten. And he had played football and probably had injuries. He had trained, done some indie work, worked a little bit in New Japan, according to Wiki, which is not always the most reliable thing, but he faced off against Scott Norton, which that must have just, poor Scott Norton. This was terrible. There was a count-out win for Dave, like in about 5 minutes, and the I Want to Be a Hulkamaniac theme played again, and you know, it's kind of funny just seeing the amount of costs that WCW cut, and apparently one thing they cut was their own dignity when it came to music. Because Jesus Christ. And it's funny that Bischoff wanted to get it out of being the Southern wrestling thing. Yet, we would have some gimmicks later on in this whole thing, and we would have Dustin Rhodes as a natural and all this, and still, it felt more fucking Southern at this point than it did in 1992, for God's sake. That being said, yeah, Dave Sullivan beat Kevin Sullivan by countout. Whatever. And then he and Shivani really sell the main event, and Arn and Dustin recaps, where Dustin tried to get Arn to be his partner, despite the fact that Arn had been part of so many of Dusty's, previous issues, breaking Dusty's leg, and all the stuff with the Horsemen, and Dusty Rhodes and all that, and whatever. Thomas the Hitman Hearns is in the front row. Go check out Hagler and Hearns. 3 of the best goddamn rounds of boxing you will ever fucking see. I believe it's on YouTube. I have it saved in my liked videos because I just have to. I have to fucking watch that occasionally because it's just absolutely insane. Hearns and Hagler. It's not the absolute best quality of video, but it's pretty goddamn good. It also is before high definition, but it's really good shit. So Dustin and Arn had a grudge match, and you had Ming, Secret Agent Ming in the front row, well, in the corner rather, and Colonel Rob Parker. They laid shit in. There was nice arm focus because Arn had targeted Dustin's arm beforehand. Dustin, at one point, tried to go for, I think, a lariat, but then flew right over the goddamn rope and went into the entranceway. They had the stupid wooden ring steps so people could get in the ring, and they really should have had him in the corner, because Austin landed on him at one point. That could have been really dangerous. But they did some nice back and forth. They broke the big moves out. Later, Arn, Premier Worker, a shame that because of a botched surgery, he was unable to continue wrestling past 1996, because he did have the surgery in 97 and was unable to, I think it was March of 97 or something like that, and he was unable to, come back. He could do some moves, do some run-ins, but could never work a full match again. But after doing a sunset flip and trying to grab the ropes, the referee says, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing?" And then Dustin gets a roll up on him, 1, 2, 3. And then a post-match attack to continue this feud, but Dustin got his win. There you are. Mean Gene is with Hogan, Jimmy Hart, and Brutus, who just stands there, and that's a good thing. That's the best use of Brutus. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Not once-in-a-lifetime promos here. By the way, that shirt's available on Redbubble if you want to check it out. So is that one back there. I don't remember the artist names, but just check it out. They're worth it. Recaps of Austin losing the U.S. title to Duggan in like 30 seconds. Because Steamboat was injured, had that back injury, and he would be gone from the company and retired for about almost 15 years. But Duggan and Austin had a U.S. title match for a jump start by Austin. He focused on the knee. Austin bumped his ass off for Duggan. Austin was really good at this point, even though he had injuries. I think he would end up, it was a bicep or a tricep injury of some variety. And he would be on the sidelines for a bit. He would make a few appearances in 95, like summer of 95, I believe, but then would be gone. And then what basically ended up happening is Duggan tried for a 3-point stance, got sent over the top rope. That's a DQ, because they were still doing that fucking rule in 1994, and look, I get it. I get why they did in the territories. But by this point, you need to stop doing that shit. Wrestling had evolved beyond that shit. And that was pretty much it. And then Secret Agent Sting and Mean Gene are talking. Sting's going to be in the front row to watch this. Vader and the Guardian Angel, yes, believe it or not, they brought him in as the boss, a.k.a. the boss man. Yes, Big Bubba, the big boss man. Now he was the Guardian Angel. And Vader... Vader did a nice actual tribute to Ali. Because you could tell that it meant a lot to him that he was there. Now, he pointed to Sting, because him and Sting had history. But he said, to Ali, who's the man, he even got down on his knees, did the Vader sign, and said, "You're the man." That was nice. That was very nice. I really wish Vader had gone in the Hall of Fame before he passed away. But that was, I thought that was very cool. Big lads fighting and colliding with each other. Poor Harley Race. Harley Race took more bumps in this, I think, than he had taken in, any matches he had in 1990 and 1991. I mean, it was astonishing. But it didn't last long. It didn't have to. We got a Vader bomb for 2. The Bubba slam, where it looked like Bubba might get the victory, but then Harley got back up on... After Harley had Vader slammed on him. And as stout as Bubba is, and as safe as he was, and as safe as Vader could be, and Harley was legit tough, God damn it, that couldn't have felt good. That could not have felt good. But Harley distracts. Harley gets suplexed in the ring, and right there, instead of the referee saying, "Hey, Harley should get out of the ring," Vader splash, 1, 2, 3, and there you are. So that's pretty much your lot right there. Not bad. Certainly ended better than their Bash at the Beach match. Mean Gene then brings out Thomas the Hitman Hearns, who tries to talk. That was a choice. I mean, I like Hearns, so he said about Hearns and Hagler, but maybe he shouldn't have done the talking here. Nasty Boys and the Southerners recap, a.k.a. Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck, where Ming got involved, and people survived because Ming took it easy on them. Nasty Boys against Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. They loved the Nasty Boys. And Nasty Boys brought out a pumpkin and later hit a pile driver on Terry Funk onto the pumpkin. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about a Nasty Boys match. It's Wrestling Bios would say, complete tit Brian Knobs. And the final build for the main event. The Ali Future Foundation, they present Bill Shaw, I believe it was Bill Shaw and Eric Bischoff, present a plaque and a check to Ali. I imagine it was probably for a significant amount because Ted Turner had great respect for Ali. And at least I assume he did. And Ali could not move. I did like the story, though, in the collision in Korea, Dark Side of the Ring, where Norton talked about the Ali getting up and doing the shadow boxing up in, God, I forget what temple it was or what, shrine it was, but he did that, and it's like he turned back the clock, which is cool. We can't see footage of it because that's North fucking Korea, but that's cool that Norton got to share that. Michael Buffer does the introductions, which take 4 years, and that's just because Michael Buffer doesn't have a grip on the English language, or a grasp, as it were. And the cage lowers with pyro. Is it a good idea to have that much pyro lowering around a cage when it's being lowered on cables? Whatever, no time for that. Hulk Hogan, with Jimmy Hart in the corner, and Sting at ringside. Took on, and by the way, Brother Brudeye would show up a little bit later. Ric Flair had Sherry in his corner. Mr. T was a special guest referee. It's for the WCW title, and it's a retirement match. Whoever loses will have to retire forever. Ric Flair is back in the ring within a few months, by the way. Hogan started immediately, hot as he's known to do. Flair bumped his ass off. Flair got battered around the cage. He targeted the knee a lot because after the Masked Man had piped Hogan's knee, Nancy Kerrigan style. There you go. Why, brother, why? Kept targeting the knee, but Flair, of course, kept, Flair kept forgetting that he's fighting Hogan, who will Hulk up at any point. Heenan was on fire here. He was over the top, but it's Bobby Heenan. He could get away with it. Mr. T got dropped for what that was worth, which was nothing. Sherry got pantsed by Jimmy Hart. And still didn't care. She wrestled around in her skivvies. I'm not complaining, because not only did Sherry look good, but Sherry was willing to always take these bumps. And then Sting got, after Jimmy Hart got attacked by the Masked Man, Sting got laid out by the Masked Man. They got taken to the back. T got cut to the ropes. That's not the first time the Sherrys, worked a pair of handcuffs. Moving on. But the Masked Man was out there and lowered his pipe like this. This does not look like he's lowering his pipe. And Hogan hit the Masked Man's pipe. So, boom, boom, boom. Hogan hulks up again. Sherry got slammed a few times. Big boot, leg drop. 1, 2, 3. The crowd was on fire during all this, by the way. I should note that. And there, Cage gets up. Flair's totally done in wrestling forever. And then he fights the Masked Man, who comes back after an inordinate amount of time wasting and celebrating and everything. I mean, good grief. I know it's the main event, but come on. Halloween Havoc has this habit of having these fuck finishes and just long stretches of the main event having ended, but then still having pay-per-view time. So they have to kill time like this. But then, he's fighting the Masked Man and everything. And who is it? Masked Man's brother Bruda. He's butchered the friendship. And then Kevin Sullivan and Avalanche show up. Gee, I wonder why John Tenta had to change to the Shark soon after. I'm not knocking John Tenta. I mean, I wish he was still here because his family lost their, somebody that meant so much to them, their provider. And he also seemed like an all-around good guy. And he also got Koji Katao to get himself out of wrestling because apparently he was a piece of shit. But they did that. Then Secret Agent Sting shows back up, and then Heenan's crying because Flair's retired, and Okerlund's telling him, "Get a hold of yourself." It wasn't a great event, but it had its moments. It was certainly better than Starrcade. That being said, let me know your thoughts on this show in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rentlin. I'll see you soon.